Welcome to the Essential 99 Punctuation Rules for Court Reporters, video number 12, the comma, part 5. I'm Ken Wick. Let's get started. This video is going to cover the comma and specifically ebook rules 14 and 14-1, which is the rule on items in a series or a series of items. The other was just a series of items with conjunctions. So, series of items. Oh, this should say rule number 14. Rule number 14, use commas to separate a series of 3 or more words, phrases, or clauses. Examples would be counsel invited John, Mary, Bob, and Barbara to lunch. And I know I have this in red and this in blue, and I'll explain this as we come down in the slides. Another example is I went to the grocery store and bought bread, milk, eggs. You can notice the difference that there's no coordinating conjunction in the last one here. So, commas are normally used to separate a series of 3 or more words, clauses, or phrases where the last item has a preceding conjunction, and I highlighted that blue. So if you were writing this, you would write the word and here. So you'd have a series, and before the last item of a series, you'd put the word and. So the question is, why is there no and here? Well, when speaking, people may omit the conjunction. They're just talking. And, who knows, maybe they thought they were going to mention something else and they just move on to the next sentence, and you don't get the conjunction. So since this occurs because court reporters are recording spoken English, things are not grammatically correct. Therefore, the court reporting rule is to use commas to separate a series of 3 or more items. So therefore, we don't need the last coordinating conjunction here. It just has to be 3 or more items you stick in the commas. So this is going to lead into just a brief discussion of the serial or Oxford comma. And this is another debated item, just like the introductory prepositional phrase where there isn't really a consensus or there's people that like to debate it. This is another one that people like to debate, is the serial or Oxford comma. And that's that the serial comma or Oxford comma is this, backing up, is this last comma right here, this one in red. This is called the serial or the Oxford comma. So if you don't know, some people would write this sentence with this comma, and some people would write it without this comma. So the question is, which one do you use? And the answer really is, which style guide are you using? So getting back to my presentation, the final serial comma is required by LMEG Rule 43, the BGGP Rule comma 16, and GPO, this is the Government Publishing Office, 8.46. So the two main style guides used in court reporting are the LMEG and the BGGP. The serial comma is required. So basically in court reporting, this comma is required. Just to note, just looking at the other style guides, so what does the Gregg Reference Manual say? Well, Rule 162A states that the serial comma avoids confusion, and it, quote, makes more sense to use the serial comma under all circumstances. Now, this style guide does recognize that that the comma is not absolutely required. And maybe just to clarify, that the comma is usually used when you write books and things like that. But in newspapers and magazines, the comma is usually omitted. Now, the reason why they probably stopped omitting the comma was space. So, and then CMOS, the Chicago Manual Style one, which generally covers book publishing, strongly recommends, it doesn't require it, but it strongly recommends the use of the serial comma. So as you can see, in these two court reporting references, it's required in the government printing office, required. The GRM basically, it's not required, but it's saying it makes sense to use it all the time. And the CMOS strongly recommends it. So people that like to argue against it, I'm not going to say they're wrong, but I recognize that they do it for journalism, for newspapers and magazines, and that's acceptable. But if you start not using it in a book, where generally they highly recommend it. It's not wrong, but it's highly recommended. So that's my take on the serial and Oxford comma. My work, I preach the serial and Oxford comma and put it in when I see it missing. And my staff knows it too. Actually, people that don't even know about grammar actually know that I call this the Oxford comma. They can actually refer to it that way. And I actually have a coworker whose sister is or could be sister-in-law, is a journalist, and he apparently has had a conversation with her about it. So the Oxford comma has been a discussion in my work. So what about after etc. or etc.? We'll cover this in a future rule. The use of this. So use a comma after etc. when it appears at the end of a list within a sentence. Within a sentence. So if the sentence ends with etc., then you just use the period. So some examples. I went to the grocery store and bought bread, milk, and eggs. So we have a list of 3 items. We're going to put commas between them. And we do put the serial comma. Just to note, this does have the coordinating conjunction, but it doesn't have to have the coordinating conjunction here. We'd still put the comma because it's 3 or more. Council invited John, Mary, Bob, and Barbara to lunch. Note that there's no comma after Barbara. You'd only put a comma after the last item if the comma is required due to some other rule. So that's a good thing to point out, is that no comma comes after the last item unless it's required for some reason. I went to the grocery store and bought bread, milk, eggs. I was just commenting on that earlier. Once again, we put the commas because it's 3 or more. My son grabbed his iPhone, swimsuit, beach towel, sunglasses for a day trip to the lake. Once again, pointing out we have 3 or more items, so we put in commas. The last item here is sunglasses. Note there's no comma after the final item unless there's a rule requiring it. In this case, there is none. My son grabbed his swimsuit, beach towel, sunglasses, etc. And we know by rule that we put a comma after etc. if the sentence continues. So it's etc. comma for day trip to the lake. Maybe this is why people accidentally put a comma after the last item, because maybe they're thinking about the etc. rule and you put a comma after it, but I don't know. I think of as in my mind, I think no comma follows, and I think of etc. as an exception. So rule number 14-1, series of items with conjunctions. Rule 14-1, if the items in a series are all connected with conjunctions and or nor, then do not use commas to separate the series. So basically, if there's coordinating conjunctions between them all, no commas. council invited John and Mary and Bob and Barbara to lunch. Since all the items are connected with a coordinating conjunction, no commas. And then here's a little bit of a trick example. I went to the store and bought bread and milk and eggs. Now, the bread and milk and eggs, these are actually coordinating conjunctions separating the items in a series, so therefore no commas. And this and here is actually a coordinating conjunction for a compound predicate. Now, I covered that before. So I went to the store and bought. So I went, if you don't know, you could say, if you want to do a skeleton version of this sentence, you can say, I went and bought things. So this is why this and is actually part of the compound predicate. These two ands are actually part of the coordinating conjunctions for this series. That's it for this video. Please subscribe. If you like the video, please hit like. And please buy the ebook.